Okay, we're going to talk about tigers. These are the 3 tiger paintings I have here. I have other tiger paintings that live with other people now. From my point of view, the biggest problem with painting tigers is they're too damn pretty. Oh, Bob. Oh, my God. You want to get off? I'm serious. They're too pretty. I need to sort of find an edge when I'm painting it somehow that hopefully my cat won't start playing with this cord. I have to hold it up high. They're just too pretty. Other than that, I have to sort of go incrementally because they have a color that allows me to get there just with glazes, which means I can get some luminescence in their coat, and I can only do that if I can sort of inch towards it. You know, maybe in another 20 years, my hand will be skillful enough and I can just go and be there, but right now I go and get there bit by bit. So, just to introduce you, this is Pandu. This is the first tiger that I painted that I met. There's an earlier tiger that I painted that I used someone else's photo for. And anyway, Pandu, I met at the Houston Zoo on my first visit. And he was a Malayan tiger. And I say was because Pandu actually was deceased by the time I finished his painting. I had the same thing around the same time happen with the lion that I painted from the Denver Zoo. He also died, but quite young. And then I learned that Pandu had died, and it just brought it home to me that I was painting real beings because, like me, they're finite in time. But Pandu was a relatively old tiger. He was 16. They can live a little longer than that, but he was actually very arthritic. He had a lot of issues with that, and he'd had gene therapy for quite some time to help deal with that, and arthroscopic surgery. They'd done what Houston Zoo had taken good care of him. And the Houston Zoo has a large moat between you and the tigers, so there is no bars or anything. And from the far side of this moat, in the afternoon, Pandu would just lie there stretched out in the center, and he would look at me when I came by. These 2 are Amur tigers, aka Siberian tigers, and this is the daughter and this is the mother. And I met them in Wichita at the Sedgwick County Zoo, and Natasha and Talali. And so the most difficult thing, as I said, about painting tigers is they're too damn pretty. And a lot of my painting tiger stuff goes on in the white paint layer, as you will see, because when I first lay in the stripes and the outline and the marking of it, I mean, tigers are pretty straightforward in terms of, what that is. But I then paint in with white all of the fur, even the fur that winds up this later, because I want the texture of the fur in my very first layer of the white paint. And then because of the colors of tigers, I can completely get to their finished color just using glazes, which are colors you can see through. And if you can see through them, then you can get more luminescence because the light literally passes way through the paint and then bounces off the back and then comes back through the paint to our eyes. And it's just a luminescence that I really like. So tigers really allow that. But
Well, the first thing I need to do is I need to choose the image that I'm going to use to paint. And I, of course, now work only from my own reference images. And hopefully I have come back with a number of them from the zoo that might work. If I don't have direct eye contact in the photo, that is certainly something I can change. And there are other variables I can change, and perhaps I may not have all the information in one photo, but between several photos I might be able to fill it all in. But in the case of these 3 tigers, Pandu, Natasha, and Talali, these were the photos that I was able to use, cropped to the size of the painting. Well, then I take those images and in my computer, turn them to black and white and up the contrast a bit because I want to see the detail. And I take these to my printer and I have them print them out actual size. And then I bring these home and put these cheap prints up on the wall and stare at them. And if they're the right size, I use them, and if they're not, I go back to the printer and have them modified as I need to. So then I take those very same prints that I have now decided will work for my painting, and I need to transfer the image to my painting surface. And for this I use carbon paper. It sounds very straightforward, but in fact, choosing which lines to mark may not be as straightforward as you would first think. But I do need, I consider this the architecture. This is the groundwork that I need and will need in the future as the painting continues. Now, this is Pandu, and we're looking at Pandu upside down for two reasons. One is I'm actually doing his drawing on a tabletop. He's a 3-foot painting, and so I'm doing it horizontally, and I'm doing this because it'd be easier over the hours on my arms rather than holding up. But also, I'm showing you upside down because I often work upside down. I often, when I work upside down, I'm tricking my brain. And I'm working outside my ideas of how things ought to look. And instead, I get to deal with form and shape and balance. So this is how I'm painting Pandu in right now, doing the black lines in. The other thing, when you do transfer with carbon paper, or if you've got a pencil line, the oil will not automatically cover that line for the future. So it's fine if you don't care if it shows through to your final painting. But if you do care that it might show through to the final painting, then somewhere in your earlier stages, you need to make sure that you are covering that line with an opaque paint, or it will read through. So here's Pandu still just showing you on the tabletop. And now he's got his background color. Next, we lay in the background color. And my initial choice on the background color has to do with the temperature that I'm looking for in the finished piece. So you can see for Pandu, I actually started with a cadmium yellow, very warm and bright. And then for Natasha, I'm using an ultramarine blue, which is a much cooler and more reserved feeling. And then for her mother, Talali, I am going with a burnt sienna, I believe. Because I eventually am going to get to my blacks by using complementary colors, the intensity of the temperature of this first color can be very modified in the end, or I can bring it out. But it's there, it's part of the evidence, it's part of the groundwork and the foundation that I put in to inform the final piece. Now this might be the fun part. So much of what I do in painting a tiger has to do with stuff that is very hard to see. This is like abracadabra right now. You can be looking at this and almost not believe me, but believe there's some shots coming up. Every bit of white is not blank, though I haven't put paint. It is all white paint, and I'm laying down every bit of that paint in the direction that I want the final fur to be going. So this photo actually gives you pretty clear evidence of what I'm talking about. And you can see the difference if you look closely between the black and the white, because the black is only in there right now as sort of a placeholder. It was a very thin paint with almost no texture to it. I will redo the black stripes as I then redo the white stripes over time. Now, if you notice here in Natasha, I have laid in another layer of ultramarine blue on her background, which is really deepening. I will eventually bring in some complementary colors so that the background will not be completely blue, but I am still happy to go with this. You can also see that I'm not really concerned to get an even color in any of my backgrounds at this particular point. So here we have the burnt sienna on Talali. Again, it's very, very hard to see in these photos, but all of the white, all of the fur in the white is laid in. You could really only see it best at the edges. And the other concern I have at this time, and will until I finalize the background, is to, at this point, the background is coming over the top of the painting until the background is sufficiently dark. And when it is, then I can again have the painting go over the background. So because a tiger has such an uneven edge because it has fur, that feathering of the edge has to happen over a finished background. I specifically took this photo when I took it at an angle with the light coming in to show the shadows, because I really wanted to be able to illustrate just how much fur-like texture I am laying in those original white layers that I'm putting in. So this is just a small little bit of what I do overall. And in this, direction is everything. It has to be, that fur has to be going in the right direction the first time you paint it in. It's not something you can fix later without scraping off the texture. So glazes, glazes, I keep talking about glazes. You know, I came to oil painting from first being a dyer, working with fabric, doing batik and hand painting with dye on cotton and silk, and then through watercolor before I came to oil. So I had 20 years experience in those other mediums before I came to oil. And those other mediums, you don't have opacity. You only have translucence. But lest I lead you to think otherwise, let me say that I am a big fan of both translucence, transparency, and opacity. Oh my God, it is such a joy to have opacity as a tool in your toolbox. And I use it, that opacity, on these tiger paintings in the white paint more than anywhere else. Even the black paint isn't quite as dependent on opacity. And white is one of your most dependably opaque paints. And white in another paint increases the opacity of that paint. It's just the nature of white paint. You will see further down the line how I do a little dance back and forth between the white and the black fur in the tiger. Well, the eyes do have it, don't they? And the day I decide to put the eyes in there, to finish the eyes and bring them home, and especially to add that white dot of reflection in the eye, is I'm very near to completing the painting now. The importance, I mean, eyes are translucent. You look at your own eyes in the mirrors and like they're layers of things. You can clearly see through. So you need to get to that finished eye with the same kinds of layering things. And usually the outside rim is a different color. And then there's also no hard edge on an eyeball. There isn't around the black dot in the middle, that's a fuzzy edge, and there isn't around the outside. So this is Natasha. We're looking into her eyes here, and they actually get a little darker. This isn't quite done yet. You can see how now I have actually sharpened the reflection in her eye. And also reflection around the rim of the eye, so that the black liner of the eye usually has a place or two along the edge of it that is catching a light and reflecting it back. And then all of these cats also have eyelashes, as do elephants have major eyelashes, but the eyelashes, then go in over. And here we have Talali again. Now, while I'm looking at the eyes, I also want to talk about the tiger's snout, because the whole nose area between the eyes and going down to the nose, this is really short hair, and this is not achieved in the same way that any of the other fur is painted on a tiger. I sort of use the butt end of a brush just to get that texture there, and then the colored gradations around the snout are fairly subtle, but they need to come in too. So the eyes are it. They bring the painting home. Now, Pandu was painted a year or two before I painted Natasha and Talali, and before I had started taking a photo every day I finished work on my cell phone. And you can tell because these aren't, they're not squared off. I got more fastidious about that going forward. And there were things then which, ways in which I technically painted Pandu that I then did not do going forward. And in Pandu, I got rid of the white ground earlier than I did in the other two tigers. And it was something that I was changed when I then did do the other two tigers, because I liked what I could do with that white ground and the luminescence rather than going to a more opaque color. Pandu is a darker orange than the other two. And doesn't he have beautiful eyes? Now, he is the oldest of these guys, too. He was 16 years old. But he is an older tiger, and that is in the body, and I think it's in his eyes. And the more I paint these animals, the more I understand, the more I can see when I look at their figure, and then the more that I can bring into my paintings too. Now, Natasha is the youngest of these three, and she is definitely still growing. I think she was just about 3 years old or something when I met her, though tigers look pretty much life-size. I mean, they're adult size from a year in, I think, but they do keep growing. There's a big difference between, you can see, in her and her mama, Talali, just in terms of the amount of weight that they carry in their body. And it just so happened that I learned the time to go and visit Natasha every day, and so at least 5 mornings I was there when she entered her area for her morning walk, and so I was literally inches from her. She completely ignored me whenever she was close to me, but she did thankfully pose for this painting up on the cliff. So she actually has a great deal, from this angle for this painting, she actually has a great deal of white in her, more than she has her orangey colors. And I have given her more of a golden yellow cast than an orange cast as compared to her mother. My own point of view on this is, in fact, all of these colors change depending upon the lighting that they're in, and so I consider I have a lot of artistic freedom in choosing which way their final colors should go. Here is beautiful Talali, mama to Natasha and Natasha's brother, who I never met, I believe from the same litter. For some reason, I actually felt that I communed more with Talali when I met her than I did with either of the other tigers in the series. There was, when she was up on her hill, which was some distance from me, but it's, in my experience, the only way tigers actually do look at you. But she was up on her hill one day and she was gnawing on a very big bone, which is out of sight in my painting. And she and I, she would occasionally lift her head up and look straight at me, and I sort of stayed there for a very long time looking back at her. You see, at one point in these paintings, very near the end, I actually went and added white along the very top of the head and along the back. It's because I had made some decisions about the lighting, and I wanted the light to be able I wanted her to also be backlit, and so it was like I had to go back and start from ground zero, putting that white ground in there so that then I could go ahead again and bring the color in there, but leave still some white coming through. So you'll see both the painting in which I added the white, and then you see what I did because I had that white on which I could work. I thought I should show you the brushes that I use for the fur. And these are the cheapest brushes you can get. They're chip brushes, basically. And I want them ragged. I am working on the tips of these. I want the tips to be irregular because it's going to help me achieve the fur look that I want. And for the fur, I am never interested in painting every single line. I can't get there. I can only do the fur by accident, really. I can't paint every hair, and just because I do not want that effect, I do not want how it looks when you do that. I want furness. I'm trying to paint furriness and so these brushes really help me to get there. And now that I've shown these brushes, I should talk about when I don't use them. But first, let's talk about the edge where the animal meets the background. And with a tiger, which is a furry animal, this is an irregular edge, and it's sort of the last thing that goes in. And along with the whiskers, this might be the one place on the painting where I actually use a very fine liner brush and not just my chip brushes, which get me that edge. But for whiskers, I definitely use a liner brush to draw them in. I have a favorite part of many paintings that not all, I don't have a favorite part of every painting, but many paintings I have a favorite part, and sometimes I have a really favorite part. And I have a really favorite part of this Talali painting. And my really favorite parts usually have something to do that just happens sort of by accident. So this is clearly the area on her back, and this is the part where I had gone in just a few steps ago and put white in again because I wanted to be able to bring the luminescence back in. But I think there's a certain sloppiness in this little section that I love. You can see the black lines, you can see the way they fragment out and go into the fur, but there's no one piece of fur that's articulated perfectly, and yet you look at this part of the painting and you just get the furnace. Talali is such a handsome, handsome tigress. Just for fun, here's 9 different versions of the painting as it went along. So you can see how I built the background up from that original very orangey color all the way through to black. And you can see at which point I start introducing the color into the painting, because now all the white fur is laid in and dried. And there she goes. Tigers.
They're fun to paint, but watch out, they're too pretty.